Welcome back to the Columbia Journalism School. And for those of you who were not here yesterday, we are pleased to have you here. Those who are returning, we are pleased to have you back and hope you had a nice time last night at Havana for those of you who went to that. I'm Ernest Sotomayor. I'm the Dean of Students, and I've been here for 8 years, so I'm going to be making some very quick comments here and a couple of housekeeping things. First, our food will be downstairs in the Stabile Student Center, so if you have a hunger attack or are dying of thirst, please go down and refresh yourself. We will have our sessions from yesterday and today recorded also on live stream, and we'll send you links to that after today, so you can go back and watch any of the sessions that you might have missed and recapture any of the information, so you don't need to furiously take notes on anything. Third, we have a Facebook group for the incoming class, as we do for all of our classes. We will send you the link to that, and if you have not joined, and I know a lot of you have because you've been very active in posting information about yourselves, getting information about your past and your work history and so forth to share with your soon-to-be fellow students, which has been great. We'll send that to you, and if you haven't joined, we encourage you to do that so you can share information about housing and things like that. I want to now share with you a note that was sent to us yesterday afternoon as we were beginning our proceedings here. And this is from someone named Shira Schoenberg from our class of 2006. I'm going to read her comment very briefly here. And she sent this to one of our professors, Ari Goldman, who's been here for a good many years. Quote, "I thought you might get a kick out of this. I was standing on the bumper of a police van this afternoon near the home of the Boston Marathon bombing suspects, together with a reporter from Newsday and a reporter from Bloomberg. It was the highest vantage point to see anything above the TV cameras. The Newsday reporter mentions that she graduated from Columbia J School in 2011. My response, obviously, was that I was there in 2006. Then the Bloomberg reporter comments that he feels old because he graduated from the J School in 1998. Your graduates are very well represented in Boston at the moment." Shira. They are, not only in Boston, but all over the world as they're covering this story and many others. So that's what you're buying into. I want to introduce and have him come up now, Dean of our school, Nicholas Lemon.
Hi again, everybody, and thanks for coming back again this morning. Let me just add to Ernest's story a little bit, which is before I was dean here, I was full-time at the New Yorker. I was the Washington correspondent, and I've remained staff writer for the New Yorker the whole time I've been dean. And every summer I have a sort of busman's holiday where they send me out to do a story about politics, which I cannot do, sadly, while dean, or maybe happily if you're a student here. So I've had the experience that in these summer hopscotching around the world adventures that I have, anytime I go to a press conference anywhere by a politician, somebody comes up to me and says, "Dean Lemon, what are you doing here?" And it's a recent alum of the school. The last time that happened was covering a press conference by President Dilma Rousseff of Brazil in the Planalto in Brasilia in the summer of 2011. So it's pretty striking that anytime you go anywhere where there's a big story breaking and there's a bunch of journalists, you're very likely to run into a Columbia J School grad. It's a good feeling. You all know, I'm sure, the term role model. What you may not know is that term was actually invented by a Columbia professor, a man named Robert Merton, who was a great sociologist here who passed away in 2003. And he actually invented the term while doing a study back in the 1940s of professional education. He was studying medical students, and he was trying to understand the process by which somebody enters a professional school and then remakes him or herself in terms of basic consciousness from a kind of citizen into a member of a profession. And one of the ways he thought that medical students do this, or found that they do this, is by identifying specific people in the professional group and then modeling themselves after those people, literally trying to look at those people and say, could I be like that? I'd like to be like that. And that's where he invented the term role model. They model the role, in his case, of the doctor. Of course, the term has become ubiquitous since then. But it's relevant for our next speaker, David Gonzalez, who is about as good as we could do in presenting you in this professional school with a role model of what it means to be a journalist who goes to this school. David graduated from, he grew up in the Bronx, where he still lives. He graduated from Columbia Journalism School in 1983, so he just had his 30th reunion. He has been at the New York Times since 1990, and you know, he's had the career that we all want to have, really. He's had a wonderful career, both in terms of, at least from the outside, it looks like a lot of fun. And what's clear from the outside is it's had a tremendous positive impact on the public in just the ways Joseph Pulitzer imagined when he started this school. David is particularly a good role model for our new curriculum because he is a writer-photographer. In the good old days when David and I were both young, if you were a writer, you weren't allowed to be a photographer, and if you were a photographer, you weren't allowed to be a writer. Now, these roles have become blended. Our school has a growing photojournalism program, and we teach you on the supposition that you will all be writer-photographers. So David will talk about the school and his experiences here and his subsequent career, but I hope as you're looking at him, without embarrassing him, if the thought, that could be me in 30 years, that career could be the career I have, that's kind of the subliminal messaging of inviting David to come and talk to you. David, come on up, and thanks.
Good morning. How are you? Let me put this down. Can I close this, or I have to leave this open? I may close it, thank you. It's weird being in this room. When I was here, when I came here in 1982, this was the morgue, so felicitously named. It's where they kept old clips, moved on like this big machine, carousel-like, that was vertical. We had our books here, and we had our master's theses bound in this place. If you want a good laugh and you want hope, I urge you to read my master's thesis. And you'll wonder, how the hell did this guy get a job at the New York Times? I'm serious. There is truth to that joke. A little over 30 years ago, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. Now, this wasn't something I had planned, but something that had dawned upon me in the 3 years after I graduated from Yale. Now, at that time, I'd gone from wanting to be a photographer, an art photographer no less. I really didn't want to make any money. And I went to working in a series of stultifying, and I mean stultifying, office jobs doing public relations for various well-intentioned and noble social service nonprofits. I wanted to be a journalist, though, I figured out. Now, there's just one problem. I really didn't have any journalism experience to speak of. I'd shot some stuff when I was in college for a community newspaper in Hartford. I sat in a couple of times at the Yale Daily News when we were ticked off about something they had written about Latinos. But I had no real experience. I didn't have any family connections. If I wanted to be a handyman, my dad could have hooked me up real good. I come from a long line of Puerto Rican handymen. However, the reason Papi was a handyman was so that I can go to school, so I can get an education, so I can get out of the Bronx. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But what I did was on a lunch break, I worked at the state office building in Harlem. I walked over here, got an application, and filled it out. And to my delight, and to be honest, to my amazement too, I got in. Now, granted, I had to take part in a summer program for not having, what I was told later, I had not shown sufficient commitment to the profession, or sufficient skill, perhaps. Now, one of my colleagues in that summer remedial program, let's be honest, let's call it what it is, he became Christian Amanpour's producer. He lives in a farmhouse outside of Paris. He has a couple of Emmys on his fireplace in said farmhouse. I'm sure he's doing okay. So I guess we did okay, even though we had to go to this remedial program to learn how to write a lead. 30 years ago, like I said, this was the morgue. 30 years ago, we still used typewriters in this joint. Typewriters so old that I'm convinced people covered the Rosenberg trial on them. I mean, we're talking old. The newsroom upstairs had an AP teletype. You know that like sound you hear on 1010 winds? That's just a loop they use, but that actually was what we heard upstairs. The teletype that clattered and chimed all day, and you listened for how many bells hit. Because if you heard like 5 bells, you knew you better listen, you better read, because something was up. They had that. Radio classes, we used tape, which you edited by cutting it on the block. You take it, you play it back and forth, kind of like, proto-scratching, if you will, and figure out where that sound bite was, and cut it, and tape it, and play it. And then you equalized it using all these knobs and stuff. This was pre-Pro Tools, obviously. These were no tools. TV classes. TV classes had these, you needed 3 people to cover a freaking story. It was like, 4, the reporter, the producer, the person carrying this big Ikegami camera, it was a nice camera, and the sound person carrying the thing that was recording everything. You went 4 people. You could have done pick-up basketball games that you wouldn't cover a story. I mean, it was a lot of folks going out there. I mean, there was no such thing as multimedia. Hell, there was no such thing as PCs, Macs, or smartphones. We all wanted to have VDTs in this place. You don't know what that is. Video display terminals. That was like the state of the art back then. But that's okay, because what we had instead were teachers who inspired us, who pushed us, and who frankly scared the living hell out of us sometimes. What we had were people teaching us to think like journalists, starting from day one. Ken Arletta came here one day, like the first week we were in school, over in the war room, and gave a talk. And he said some very provocative things about the mayoral race that year regarding Edward I. Koch, the I standing for his personal favorite pronoun. Clyde Haberman forged that one. I'm not going to claim credit for Clyde's remark. But he gave this talk. Then we went back to RW1 and we wrote it up. And every single story in RW1 started with, Ken Arletta visited the journalism school today. Karen Rothmeyer, my sainted RW1 teacher, actually had to read 18 of these Ken Arletta came to the journalism school today leads. We forgot that he actually said something rather provocative about Koch that had some relevance, that had some news to it. No, Ken Arletta came to the journalism school today. We had a lot to learn. In my case, I was lucky enough to study with Karen and also with another person who had a profound influence on me. I mean, Karen had the patience of a saint. She taught me the nuts and bolts, how to write a lead, how to figure out a quote, how to figure out an idea for a story. All these things mattered. That's really important. But Penn Kimball, to me, this legendary professor who had worked everywhere, and I mean everywhere, U.S. News, before it was U.S. News and World Report, that's how far back we're talking about, newspaper PM, look it up, Time Magazine, Sunday Times Magazine, worked for Adlai Stevenson, worked for Harriman. I mean, the guy was amazing, and he was teaching us. And I can honestly say I owe my career to Penn Kimball. He taught me, us, really, how to write. Living and breathing characters on a stage that you set up, that come out, say their piece, move on, that move a story forward, that take you and the reader to places that you haven't been before. To report on policy, how it affects people, as opposed to just talking to talking heads. But to really show how these concepts affect lives. It's amazing stuff. He pushed you. You ever see the movie The Paper Chase? Remember Professor Kingsfield with John Houseman? Think of a guy like that in journalism school. That was Penn Kimball, a man who grew up patrician but had this real, almost like a Roosevelt sense of duty to expose and help. But he also would mess with you. I mean, there was one student in our class who was scared to go to a particular neighborhood, so he made sure that was her beat for the entire class. Seriously. In my case, he did exactly what my parents didn't want me to do. He sent me right back to the South Bronx to report. And I'm so glad he did, because I was able to witness a lot of things that in my professional career I wound up writing about. He gave me the tools to get a job, but he did one more thing. He actually got me a job. Nowadays, you got this wonderful setup here in career services. Full disclosure, my wife works there. But you have these services in career services that will really help you. Back when we were students here, you had a better chance getting hooked up by your professor. And fortunately, Kimball knew a lot of people. He thought I might be interested in TV. I'm sitting in his office. He picks up the phone, calls up a vice president at ABC News. The next week, I'm sitting at ABC News discussing my life. Turns out, he even told me this when I walked down the hall. Oh, I gave your name to somebody at Newsweek. They're looking to hire a summer intern. I expressed zero interest in news magazines. I spent 7 years at Newsweek after I graduated from this place. Became a correspondent and deputy bureau chief. You know, all these lessons stayed with me to this day. And for many years, Penn and Karen were people I called to for advice on stories. Sometimes they'd call you. I had once done a story on the Daily News strike back in 1990, which was a very bitter newspaper strike. And I did a piece that looked at management's allegations of an orchestrated campaign of violence by the unions. I'll never forget, it was a big page one story, and Penn calls me up, not to congratulate me, but just to say, I see you did a management special today. What are you going to do about the poor people, David? What are you going to do about the Bronx? Penn loved to fuck with you. I'm sorry, pardon my French. Penn just loved it. He loved to mess with your head. So what did I do about the poor people? My people. I did a series with Celia Duggar on Mott Haven, how this neighborhood in the South Bronx became the repository for every institution that no other neighborhood would want, from incinerators to drug treatment to 2 family shelters. I found the people behind the stories. I found in Mott Haven, this place that was like the Wild West. I mean, there was a drug gang called the Wild Cowboys. I'm not being, metaphorical here. I mean, the Wild Cowboys were nuts. I found that in the middle of this neighborhood that was awash with crack and guns and death, I found Johnny Castro, a self-educated poet and writer who dedicated 7 years of his life in the middle of this place to translate Paradise Lost into Spanish. If the symbolism hammer don't hit you with that one, nothing will. But that was Penn, to find these kinds of stories, to find these people. I've been to El Mozote to watch people who were killed in one of the worst massacre in the Western Hemisphere during the Cold War era, to watch the reburial, and to write it from the point of view of the people who were praying over their dead relatives some decades earlier. People that illustrate big things. I wouldn't have had that career if it hadn't been for Penn Kimball and Karen Rothmeyer, and especially not for Columbia. I needed Columbia. So, why do you need Columbia? It's time to get religion, boys and girls. Because you need Columbia. You don't know it, but you need it. I'm serious. Now, the rise of technology has democratized the media. I mean, you got one of these, you can cover a story, you can surf the web. If you don't got one of those, well, hell. Just bust out your MiFi, a tablet, a spare battery, and a digital Leica. I'm not pulling that out. You can cover stuff, but you know what? Can you tell a story? Can you spot a story? Can you figure out how to talk to a total stranger, a neighbor that might scare the hell out of you? Because you don't need all that. What you need, maybe, is you don't have a notebook in your pocket, and I don't, they're in the car. You just go to Duane Reade. I mean, hell, there's one in every corner in New York City. Buy a 99-cent notebook, and you're good to go. Because that's what you need. You need to learn these skills. Because, listen, who needs J-School when you can set up a blog, post your pictures and your stories, and build a following? That's why you need J-School, because anybody can do that. And you're not just anybody. You got some goals, you got some ideas, you got something to say, you want something you want to show people. No matter the technology, no matter the platform, there is something that is foundational that you get here, which is the ability to spot a story, to shape that idea, to write it, shoot it, and produce it. Doesn't matter if you're writing a piece on your smartphone, which I have done, or dictating a story straight from your notebook into the phone, which I also did, and I talked it right onto page 1 after the Salvador earthquakes in 2001. You got to know how to do this stuff quickly, well, and with some flair, not too much. Don't fall in love with words too much right now. This is where you learn something almost quaint. Craft. Craft. That is so freaking important. Listen, if it was just about talking to people, making some cute, snarky, philosophical comment and posting a picture of what you ate or what you saw, then hell, just stay on Facebook. Don't be a journalist. You know, go do something else. You know, we did a portfolio review at the Lens blog recently, and I looked at a lot of young photographers, even photographers who've been working at newspapers. They already, you know, they're already doing the dance. They had access to places. They didn't know how to work it. I'm looking at pictures, and I'm like, this one guy showed me pictures of a family that adopted 7 kids and had raised 40 foster kids. And my first question was, are they evangelical? I know a little bit about religion. I wasn't stereotyping. I just said, you know, I'm thinking motivation. Why? He says, I think they are. I said, you go to church with them? No. Do they go to church? Oh, yeah, every Sunday. I said, you might want to go to church with them next time. Figure out the motivation. Show their lives. He had no pictures of them outside of their home. He was just so excited they were talking to him, he forgot the story. He had access to this wonderful story, but you look at the pictures, you just saw the same damn picture over and over again, except with a different kid in the frame. You know, he didn't get out. He didn't tell the story. He didn't tell the arc. I also talked to a person who has a very successful blog, who admitted he's never been edited. We all get edited. I get edited. Makes you all stronger. So we talked about writing for half an hour. He took out all these notes, stuff that I take for granted, stuff that you learn here. So yeah, you can go and start a blog and get all your friends and their friends saying how wonderful and brilliant you are, but you want to be able to tell a story that has craft, that has impact, that has reach. And you got to talk about craft. You got to delve deeply into stuff. This is where you learn your craft, right here. And here's the kicker. You get to do it at a place where you can learn from some of the best professionals out there, from professors who have taught for many years and know how you need to learn. How you need to learn. I repeat, you know, check your ego at the door, get humble, and you will learn a lot in this joint. You will learn from lecturers who are accomplished, people you won't meet if you go to work from some small paper somewhere where they're having you cover 5 stories a day. You won't have a chance to learn craft there. You'll have a chance to learn how to work your ass off, no doubt. But will you learn craft? Will you learn ideas? And you'll have contact with adjuncts who have daily experience out there in that real world. And even better yet, like they say, but wait, there's more. You get to do it in New York City. Now, this is important not because you get to chill out in Brooklyn and drink artisanal whatnots and wear cute hats and rock an ironic mustache while playing Twister in some form of bodega on Hughes Street. If any of you have, I apologize, but the truth is painful. It's important because you're in a city, the Upper West Side and Park Slope notwithstanding, that is changing drastically. Drastically. People with names like mine, like my sons, like my wives. A city that is international. It is a harbinger of what this country is becoming. It is a place where you can speak Chinese if you can while you're working, Spanish, Urdu. You speak another language, you can work it out here. And you can learn how to use it as a journalist here. That's really important. You don't need to go overseas. You may want to, you may be able to afford to. But hell, you want Malians? Go to Highbridge in the Bronx. You want Mexicans? Go to Mott Haven in the Bronx. You want Cambodians? Go to Belmont or University Avenue in the Bronx. You kind of get I'm biased about the Bronx, okay? You know, you want Garifuna, you want Hondurans? Take your pick. You can get Hondurans from Tegucigalpa in the Bronx, so you get Garifuna, the Caribbean Hondurans, descendants of runaway slaves up around Tremont Avenue. You can actually find a Garifuna church on Brook Avenue in the Bronx. I'll let y'all figure out what cross street. Not hard to find. Now, you can be arrogant or ignorant and say, I'd rather just go overseas and start stringing. Those are the important stories overseas. Well, good luck with that. But if you come here, you can do all that and more under the guidance of teachers, editors really, who can help you in ways that will make you stronger as a reporter and as a storyteller. Like I said, you can do all this great stuff right here in New York with a Metro card and a notebook you buy at Duane Reade. Listen, I spent a year up the street from here in a tiny storefront church with Pentecostals who were praising Jesus and praying for holy fire every single day. Purpose of that story, of that year of my life, was to illustrate how Pentecostalism, a very special form of evangelical Christianity, was reshaping New York City, just as it has reshaped Latin America and Africa and other parts of the third world, except most Americans are too provincial to realize this, because nice secular humanists think, well, people who jump up and down, speak in tongues, and lay hands and anoint must be crazy, must be crazy. Never mind that, maybe 10% of New York is Pentecostal. Must be crazy. The late John McCandless Phillips could have straightened you out on that. If you don't know who he is, look up his obit. It's worth reading. He lived across the street from here. But I found in this little church with 60 people why they jumped up and down, why they prayed, why they laid hands on each other, why they went to church every night, why they did all this. You'll have to read it to find out why. I'm no dummy. I want you to read it because those are the lessons I learned here. The local is global. You don't have to go overseas. You are overseas. And you're in a place that can give you the space and the time and the encouragement to make that happen in your career, to carry it through. I started out wanting to be a photographer. I got all these wonderful tools, and I love my tools. But they're just tools. They're things. You make these things do their magic. It's not the other way around. But life is good. I got the display piece on Metro today with my column and my picture. Multimedia on dead trees, kind of. What I'm saying is, this is where you learn all that. This is where it starts. And if you're lucky, and believe me, I have been lucky, it stays with you. Thank you. If you have questions,